if we make a practice in our lives, like going to the gym, eating healthy, if you want to lose weight and be fit, or you want to be chiseled, you got to make it a practice. It's a daily practice. You can't be like, go to the gym for a week and then eat cake for 30 days, nonstop and say, hey, what happened? I was getting in shape, So if you do that, whether you're feeling bad or whether you're feeling good, that doesn't matter. That's just your practice. Like you wake up or you go to sleep, certain things you do. It's a fundamental practice. Just like, you're talking about writing, it's a practice. And then you hit the flow state. Same thing in life. You make it a practice, your life hits a flow state. And things in life happen. Like, look, people die. Nothing we can do really can stop that. At least in human history hasn't. And like people we love die, or people come out of lives. Things happen. So I don't think we can stop that in life. But what we can do is, if we hit that flow state, first of all, we bounce back much faster. And second of all, it does, like, the things that used to bring us down don't bring us down like they used to before. Mm-hmm. That's also huge. So then it's only the real tragedies in life that bring us down. Losing a loved one, die is a real tragedy. And that should bring you down. I mean, really, you should feel. Yeah. And it's good to feel. It's good to have loved someone that way, that and feel the loss. But the other stuff, the other garbage, the 99% of the stuff that brings us down, that doesn't matter, lessens. And is power lessons. So I would say to someone who's either down or up, just what matters is a fundamental daily practice on working on your inner self that keeps you in your personal flow.
I'm Srini Rao, and this is the Unmistakable Creative Podcast, where you get a window into the stories and insights of the most innovative and creative minds who've started movements, built thriving businesses, written best-selling books, and created insanely interesting art. For more, check out our 500-episode archive at unmistakablecreative.com. Managing your mindset is one of the most important things you can do to get through the crisis that we're currently in. That's why we're co-hosting a live conversation with Sarah Sarkis on Friday, June 12th at 3 p.m. Mountain Time about how to manage your mental health in the midst of the pandemic. It's completely free. All you have to do is join our listener tribe at unmistakablecreative.com/tribe and RSVP under events. Again, that's unmistakablecreative.com/tribe. Kamal, welcome to the Unmistakable Creative. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
Good. Thanks for having me. Good to be back after all these years.
It is, yeah, it has been quite some time. I mean, we had you back in the day on the show when we were still called Blogcast FM, and when, your first book, Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It, had just come out. But, what prompted this conversation was, one, I've been wanting to bring you back for quite some time because I had so many more questions to ask you that I didn't get to ask in the first interview. And we know that you have a new book coming out, which obviously we will talk about. But before we get there, I want to start with something that is a bit different than, the way you and I have started our conversations in the past. And that is, what is the most important thing that you learned from your father and your mother that has had an impact on your life and your work?
Wow, that's quite a question.
You'll get used to this, don't worry.
Wow. Let me think. Well, okay, so I'll just, honestly, for my father, because my parents were separated when I was a little kid and divorced, I didn't grow up with my father. Mm-hmm. Although I was with him the night he died. Unfortunately, I actually learned an example of certain ways not to be. Mm-hmm. Honestly, my father was a very troubled man, and I actually had to deal with that. And it's almost like you can get a guide in way to be and a way not to be. Mm-hmm. And it was a guide in certain ways of ways not to be. Mm-hmm. And for my mother, she's got the biggest heart. Like, she's a strong, independent woman who raised my brother and I with no money, minimum wage, in some pretty, pretty rough conditions. And yes, she did it with a full, loving heart, and doing whatever it takes to get my brother and I, out in the world. And wherever we are is really thanks to her. Mm. So just independence, open heart. That's my mom. That's what I learned.
So multiple questions come from this. You mentioned that your father was an example of what not to do. And yet for so many of us, our parents are actually an example of what to do or what to become like. And I'm curious as to why you think you had the self-awareness to realize that this is not the way you should be. Whereas many young people, I don't think, would have had that self-awareness. Like, what is the difference between the person who becomes the replica of the parent that they don't want to be like versus the one that does what you've done?
Choice, man. Yeah. It just comes down to choice. Choice and being conscious about it. There's no magic formula. It's like, we may find ourselves with particular traits, but, it's up to us whether we want to express those traits to the world and how we want to express them. So I think it fundamentally comes down to personal choice, personal commitment, and how we want to be in the world. And the people who raise us, we can't help but be examples of, North Stars, South Stars. They're human beings, and either way, it's a lesson that we can learn from, be better.
So you said your mom, because of the conditions that you were raised in, which I'd like to hear more about in detail, kind of imparted this sense of resilience and a big heart to you. And I'm curious if those are traits that can be learned and developed, or, are they the result of the environment? Can you develop to the level that you have without having been brought up in the environment that you were, I guess is really the question.
One can become anything they want, honestly, man. I've seen enough in my life and I've done enough in my life to believe that. As for where we came from, it could have completely gone the other way too. Look, we came from a very rough background, where we lived, and my brother and I were on our own all the time, and it's what, so we could use that excuse where we grew up. You either escaped, or by the time you were in high school, you just lived and died there, and both of us, chose to escape and go and do bigger and better things, and we've done, wherever we're in life, I think both came from personal choice. I think ultimately, though, it just goes down to personal choice and who we want to be and how we want to get there. And we don't even have to know how we want to get there. Just who we want to be starts the ball rolling. Yeah, I don't think there's anything. As far as can someone be that way? Of course. I mean, parents, I have friends of mine who parents raised them to be that way. They're beautiful, loving families and safe, grew up with a beautiful, upper middle class or wealthy background that turned out that way. I think it's an individual thing. It's going to be by choice. With my brother and I think it was by choice and by a different kind of example. We're human beings. There's nothing that's ultimately foreign to us as human beings. And so we can be, if we choose to be, any kind of human being we want to be. It's a matter of how badly do you want it. I had to go do certain things to actually develop that. I went to college for a year, full scholarship, and I was bored out of my mind, and I wanted to serve my country, so I just stopped that and went and joined the army. And I was I was an infantry soldier, just a grunt. That taught me a lot about independence and confidence that I've carried over the rest of my life. That some of the things I've done in my life, I look back to that 18-year-old who was at boot camp, that confidence he developed in himself in boot camp, Fort Benning, Georgia in the summer, is directly because of that. There was nothing in my upbringing that would have sent me to the army. That was a personal choice that I wanted to serve. And it has paid off in dividends in so many ways. I can't even begin to list them all, but ultimately, the sense of confidence that I can just take care of myself and handle whatever comes my way. So, it's actually life experiences we choose can also give us that. Some of my travel experiences have given me that. Writing books has given me that. Building companies has given me that. All these things, where we challenge, put ourselves out there. They all give you that. At least the independence and the ability to go and make stuff happen.
What would you say was one of your earliest life experiences that planted the seed for your interest in doing what you've ended up doing as both a writer and an investor? And what's been the trajectory of your work, and what have been some of the significant inflection points of your career in your life?
Well, if you're asking for youngest experience, I had no idea what a VC was. I don't even know if they existed, at least in the world I grew up in, but writer, dude, books were my refuge when I was a kid. I spent my entire childhood reading books and, doing sports and stuff, but books were my refuge. So they've always been, stories have been so important to me. So it makes sense that I naturally become a storyteller. As far as venture capital or investing, man, that's nothing I ever planned. It was, it's another thing I've learned. You go down a rabbit hole, any rabbit hole, and eventually, and as you work at it, you figure things out, other things happen. I started my career in the first .com boom. Building startups. I didn't become a VC until I had my first major failure and I lost everything. And after that, I decided, what do I want to do? And I went off and being an entrepreneur, I went off and built my own VC fund. But it wasn't some long drawn out plan. I'm not even a big believer in those long drawn out goals. It's more of a matter of like a step-by-step working at something, giving your all, that just leads to places, leads to opportunities. The reason why I'm very good at what I do as a VC is because of all the experience in building startups and all the friendships I made and the people I helped along the way. That we are all at a certain place in our life where we can help each other. There was no grand plan there, and it's like there was no grand plan. It was just throwing myself into things, figuring them out, and going from there. So there's no childhood experience I can point to in investing. I had no idea I was ever capable of that. That would be where my life would go. I was pretty lost as a kid. I really didn't know what I wanted.
Do you remember if any book in particular ignited this desire to be a writer?
No. It was just a matter of writing, trying to tell stories. No particular book said, okay, after this, I want to read this. But I know the book that inspired me to actually become the best writer I could be, which was I picked up Hemingway's Farewell to Arm. I remember studying at Barnes & Noble years ago and picked it up, and I just finished writing the first draft, actually, of this very novel that we're going to talk about later. And I started crying because I realized what real writing was and how far I had to go. But it gave me a marker. And so I spent like over a decade obsessively writing and rewriting and collecting rejection letters and becoming a better writer. So it didn't start writing, but it started my path on being such a good writer that I could serve the story, which is important. In the end, fundamentally you're serving the reader, and what serves the reader is the story you're telling. So you have to be the best writer you can be to tell the story the best way you can, to serve the reader the best way you can.
So I'm curious about what your sort of daily writing practice and habit and ritual looks like, based on what you've just said. I think you and I share a similar habit in that we treat this as a practice. So I'm curious what yours looks like.
It depends. When I'm working on a book, it's like full on. I separate my life into chunks. We were talking about earlier before the interview. I run a VC fund. I'm on the board of companies. I advise startups and entrepreneurs. But it's a very different part of my brain. Like the moment I go into business mode, I'm into like a whole different side. I can't like context switch back and forth between that and creativity and just the kind of stuff I write, which is like bleeding on the page. And then from that, removing all the non-essential, only leaving what matters. So actually, when I'm writing, working on a book, I minimize everything else in my life and work on that. And I do it or at the very worst, I will actually do it different times a day. So they completely separate. I can think a certain way versus thinking about business versus thinking about about writing a character who's like going through something in life and what he's learning is a completely different thing. So I either separate those two completely in the week. Like these days I'm writing these like 10 hours a day. These days I'm working like in startups and VC stuff, or like during parts of the day. That's the only way I think I've learned to handle that. So there's no like specific ritual for writing. As horrifying as that sounds, it's more when I wish I had ritual for other things that actually give me the foundation to live my life the way I want to live and write. Like right now, look, I'm running a VC fund. I'm raising another fund. I'm like contemplating moving. So I'm working with my attorneys to figure some things out on that. And I'm a syndicate. Angel syndicate launching in January. Plus, I'm on the boards of companies. Plus, I'm advising companies. Plus, I have a novel coming out in a few weeks. By a traditional publisher. I mean, it's like, like how I managed to do that is beyond me. I just chunk it in different parts of the day, and in that, the one thing I actually have lost is regular writing, and it's the one thing I miss the most. And it's funny, I was thinking about that today because it's what's actually given me the best things in my life is putting my writing out to the world. So. Ideally, like I do something as simple as I just write just a certain amount a day. That's it. If that could be my minimum practice, doesn't matter what time of day it is. Before I go to bed, I just block off a chunk of time and write that amount of time. This is when I'm not working on a book. That simple. It's not words. It's time. I'd rather write one true sentence than write 1,000 words of garbage. I mean, like my personal version of what I consider garbage. So. Everybody's got their process. Some people do words. Some people do like Hemingway used to do word. I think word count. I do time. Ass on chair, time on chair, and that naturally leads itself. What's interesting is when you're really in it, sometimes time flies and you've done like 5x the time. That's but you only do it by doing the bare minimum every day.
Yeah, for sure.
So we know a lot of you have been listening to us for years, and it means the world to us. What we do here at The Unmistakable Creative wouldn't be possible without the support of our listeners. If the podcast has been valuable to you, one of the best ways you can support us is to subscribe to Unmistakable Creative Prime, which gives you access to transcripts, all of our courses, monthly coaching calls, live chats with our guests, and an incredible community of creatives. And it costs less than you spend on a cup of coffee every month. For the school teachers and people in our education system, Prime is completely free to help you with this transition to teaching online. We've packed it with a ton of value and actionable content, and we hope you'll check it out. Just go to unmistakablecreative.com/prime to learn more. Again, that's unmistakablecreative.com/prime.
Well, I'm writing an entire section specifically about flow, and that was a big part of what I discovered was, okay, it's a series of paradoxes, right? Like you know, flow feels effortless, but you have to put in effort to get into that place of flow, and you have to be able to tolerate the 1,000 words that are just complete crap before you get to the next 1,000 that are amazing. You know, Sally Hogshead even said to me in a conversation that the best writing happens not in hour 1, but in hour 2 and 3.
Yeah, it's really like, it's like the mind gets like, I'm afraid of going back to writing because I'm going to be writing garbage for a while, you know, like your mind just gets like kludgy, and you have to like, it's almost like you got to start moving the machinery and oiling it and, you know, getting it humming. It's like James Altucher was telling me, if he doesn't write for 3 days in a row, like his writing then turns into crap. And he's totally right. It's something about the mind needs to go to a special place. It's almost like the mind needs to get out of the way. And writing is an amazing way to do that, but it requires training. It's practice. And you can't. It's like going to the gym. You know, if you work out every day and then you take 3 months off and you go to the gym, you're not going to be able to lift what you were lifting before. You'll kill yourself, right? It works the same exact way. So you know, I kudos to all the writers like yourself who actually have a daily, full-on focused practice, regardless. I am kind of a little bit unscheduled that way. I do it on a project-based basis.
Let's talk about your time in the Army, and I have several questions about this. The first being, you know, as somebody who is Indian, you know, obviously I'm Indian too, that is really about as out there as you could possibly get in terms of a choice to make in your life, in terms of what you're going to do. So I'm curious, kind of, one, what is the response from the community, and how is culture, you know, growing up Indian impacted your own life experience? Because obviously I know that it has had a profound impact on many of the choices I've made and many of the choices I chose not to make. So I'm just curious, kind of, what impact culture has had on that whole experience of the Army.
Honestly, not much. Like when we grew up, my mom was always gone working, like morning till night. She commuted like I think 2 hours a day for a minimum wage job. So my brother and I raised ourselves. There was no like real community. We didn't grow up in an Indian community. We grew up in Jamaica, Queens, where all the rappers came from, and you had 10 locks on your doors. It was just that's what it was. So I didn't even think of. So I've always been very independent, figuring out my own thing. And joining the Army was a personal choice. We were immigrant children, when we came here, and I felt a strong loyalty and gratitude to the United States. It's made me one of its own, and I wanted to give back. And that was at 18-year-old. That seemed like the best choice I could make. And looking back, it really was an amazing choice in so many ways, and because of the person I became because of that. So the whole Indian thing never really got in the way or got out of the way. It just was not a part of the equation, honestly.
So you mentioned that you learned a lot of things that have served you incredibly well in your life. I'm curious what some of those were, and kind of what people who are listening might take away from that.
So this is what I got out of the military. A couple of things. One is, look, I was 18 years old. I was a kid, but I didn't have much self-confidence. I just, most of my friends didn't even think I would make it through the first 4 weeks of boot camp. Let alone infantry boot camp, which I chose the hardest boot camp the Army had. And but like every day going there, being in there, being challenged, stepping up, and like making it through. I remember after 13 and a half weeks, when my drill sergeant pinned my infantry blue cord on my shoulder, like the pride I felt, I had earned it. It was like the first time in my life, I turned 19 in boot camp. I had earned something special. I'd earned the right to be an American soldier. I'd earned the right to wear that uniform, that cord that had such a long, illustrious history behind it. it was immensely powerful. The confidence it gave me in myself that I could do this. Like, I didn't have that confidence before. And the funny thing about confidence is if you develop it in one area of your life, it just ripples over to other areas of your life. Like the boy who walked in, I was bussed in to Fort Benning, Georgia, versus the boy who was bussed out, walked differently. You carry yourself differently. And I've noticed that in the rest of my life. Like I just, like I will jump into things and try things and not be afraid. Or if I'm afraid, I know I'll somehow figure it out, which I think honestly came from some personalities, some childhood rearing, but really a lot from just going to boot camp and just being challenged every day. The whole point of boot camp is to make you miserable every possible way they can. Mm-hmm. That's all it is. You're just constantly miserable, and you realize, hey, I can get through this. I can do this. I can do this. And also, I think it was a great growing up experience for me. And also just being surrounded by, like, in my platoon, there were guys who were like former gangbangers from LA, guys who were like full on racists from other places, all these, and also thrown together. We had to become one, part of each other's lives, and how we melded and how we fought and how we got together, and it became a brotherhood, which really showed me also a microcosm what this country's about. Is so different. We're all from so many different experiences, and yet we can come together and be part of some one thing, one ideal. Mm-hmm. So I'm very, very grateful for that. I got to see that part of America. I think it's a very important part of the American dream. And now as a writer, as an entrepreneur, as a VC, I get to contribute to the American dream in a different way by creating entrepreneurship, by writing these books that literally have saved lives. Mm-hmm. And another interesting thing is when I meet other people who've served, you just feel a bond. You never have to have served in the same time. Just the fact that you're in boot camp at some point in your life and you wore a uniform, you feel there is a bond. I've had business meetings that have just weren't going well. All of a sudden you realize that guy was in the Marines and I was in the Army, and bam, forget it. That all goes out the window. We have something in common, that we all chose to serve our country. There's something really special about that. Yeah.
Wow. So, in the last conversation we had, we were talking about your book, Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It. And that was really the impetus for that book, was really a dark chapter of your life. And I was wondering if you could kind of take us there a little bit and, talk about that.
Sure. It's funny, man. It's like sometimes, that was when I hit a real personal bottom. And out of that actually came such a beautiful, transformative part of my life that my life has never been the same again. I was building my last company and it was doing great, and I put all my money into it, and it fell apart after 3.5 years, and I fell apart with it. And I was locked up, depressed, miserable, and I decided I was going to get out of it, die trying, and started working on my inner self, and came up with this practice that just seemed to work, and it shifted my inside. And as we know, or at least as I've learned, if you shift your inside, the outside shifts. Mm-hmm. It's life really just is, I don't know, it's just a fundamental law of nature of life. And it changed my life. And then when I wrote that book and put it out, which was another thing, it was terrifying because I thought I would ruin my career in Silicon Valley. Here I'd failed massively. Then I put out a little book saying, hey, I love myself, I'm cool. But the book wasn't about that. The book was actually like a practical application of how I loved myself. Anyone can just do it step by step. And that book came out and put me on the map. I had no idea it would, and changed my life. And but a lot of that came from that decade of writing obsessively and rewriting and collecting rejection letters. And then saying, okay, I'm going to be a better writer so that next year I won't get rejection letters, and next year getting more rejection letters, but better. The year after, getting better rejection letters until they were like phone calls and in-person meetings, right? Uh-huh. From that level of obsession to be a better writer let me write that book. So it's interesting, that decade of rejection letters, which did not feel good at any one that I got, were, really, but what was the best gift I could have been given as a writer? Because otherwise I'd be writing garbage and drivel and clever stuff, not the simple from the heart stuff that I write now. That had to, my ego, I had to learn the craft. And then when my company crashed, my ego had to be stripped. And we put those together. You have craft, and now you have no ego, and you want to share, you have magic.
I love that.
Trust me, I didn't plan any of that. Would I have, man? It was hard.
You and me both.
Yeah, right.
One of the things that I very distinctly remember, because I remember I had read the book before our first conversation, and then, I think probably a year or so later, I found myself in probably one of the worst periods of my life, like just crippled by depression. And there's something in that book that really struck me, and I still remember it to this day, and I may butcher the quote, but it was something along the lines of, when things are bad, it feels like it's going to last forever, and when things are good, it feels like it's never going to end.
Yeah, recency bias. Yeah.
And I'm really curious what you would say to the person who is in that moment in their life where it feels like it's never going to end.
It's a classic thing, Solomon's ring, this too shall pass. Mm-hmm. That is the only fundamental truth in life, is everything changes. We just get stuck in our monkey minds that we're walking around in. We just upright primates in some ways, in this brain. And if you're in dark, you only see darkness. If you're in light, you only see light, or you can imagine darkness. But what I would say is, ultimately in all these things, if we make a practice in our lives, like going to the gym, eating healthy, if you want to lose weight and be fit, or you want to be chiseled, you got to make it a practice. It's a daily practice. You can't be go to the gym for a week and then eat cake for 30 days, nonstop, and say, hey, what happened? I was getting in shape,
Uh-huh.
So if you do that, whether you're feeling bad or whether you're feeling good, that doesn't matter. That's just your practice. Like you wake up or you go to sleep, certain things you do. It's a fundamental practice. Just like, you're talking about writing, it's a practice. And then you hit the flow state. Same thing in life. You make it a practice, your life hits a flow state. And things in life happen. Like, look, people die. Nothing we can do really can stop that, at least in human history hasn't. And, people we love die, or people come out of our lives, things happen. So I don't think we can, stop that in life, but what we can do is, so we hit that flow state, first of all, we bounce back much faster. And second of all, it does, the things that used to bring us down don't bring us down like they used to before.
Mm-hmm.
That's also huge. So then it's only the real tragedies in life that bring us down. Losing a loved one, die is a real tragedy. And that should bring you down. I mean, really, you should feel.
Yeah.
And it's good to feel. It's good to have loved someone that way, that and feel the loss. But the other stuff, the other garbage, the 99% of the stuff that brings us down, that doesn't matter, lessens. Mm-hmm. And it's power lessons. So I would say to someone who's either down or up, just what matters is a fundamental daily practice on working on your inner self that keeps you in your personal flow. To use your word.
So given that people are listening to this at the very beginning of the year, which is a time when I think a lot of people think about goals, they think about achievement, they think about what they're trying to accomplish. In addition to what you've said, what would you say to people about the goals that they've set for the new year, or how they should think about it?
Okay. What I would do? I would throw out every goal you got, and I would actually just look for simple, fundamental commitments you make to yourself. That's it. Look, a goal could be, I'm going to lose, 30 pounds by May XX, whatever. Or a commitment could be, I am going to eat this way and I'm going to work out this way, period. Every day of my life, or every day. That'll get you to the goal, and it'll get you beyond it when the goal's over. Mm-hmm. I'm a big believer in personal commitment, man. If there's one thing that's changed my life again and again, it's personal commitment. Look, that love yourself thing came from a personal vow I made to myself, so I committed. I had to figure it out, right? When I start to write these books, I make a personal commitment that I'm going to give them my all and do whatever it takes to make them the best I can. So I think goals are temporary, like commitment, personal commitment, lasts our lives, and that's what makes us who we are. I think Scott Adams, really smart guy, creator of Dilbert, he has a book called How to Fail at Everything and Still Succeed. Mm-hmm. And in that he talks about systems versus goal, which is pretty much the same thing. He says systems you set in place, like rituals, will get you to the goals and beyond, versus just go for a goal. So I would say for the beginning of the year, make a couple of really powerful, fundamental commitments to oneself on how you're going to be in a certain area of life, and just be that. Blow your goals off, or blow you way beyond your goals.
Wow. So I want to talk about the decision to start a venture fund after blowing up a startup. Because that's not the norm. So normally, like if you mapped out that trajectory, that would not be the most logical progression. Is
Yeah,
you know
right.
what?
Yeah,
I made a startup go bust, and now I'm going to start a VC fund. So I'm curious because I know you talked a little bit about this at our event when you were a speaker about the power of doing things that are inappropriate. So I'd love for you to expand on that response to a situation like that, because it's almost the polar opposite of what anybody in their right mind would do.
Well, actually, but I have also built startups that did very well.
Okay, fair.
So I've had both that experience. But you're right. After blowing one up, how do you? First of all, how do you go and build your fund and build a venture fund? It is not the path that would tell you in business school. It's not. But I think the best ones are not. They can't be taught. It was just a matter of what problem do I want to solve. Ultimately, you don't start a startup unless there's some problem that you want to solve that's keeping you up at night that you just have to solve. That's fundamentally what a startup is. Forget all the sexy Instagram quotes and everything about killing it. So you're trying to solve a problem, and that's all you do. Solve a problem, then you solve it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. That's how you can become $1 billion company. Every single big company I've seen that way happen that way. So there was another problem I wanted to solve, and it wasn't. I didn't want to build in the startup anymore because there was no problem I wanted to solve that I needed company to build a company to. What I wanted to solve was what I wished I'd had as a VC, which was I'd had some very helpful VCs, but then I had VCs who were just always paid lip service that they're value add, and the value add is like the most useless, boring garbage ever. Because they've never built a company, they've never failed or succeeded. They got an MBA, they got out of school, and they started becoming an investor. There are some like that who are really good, but there are many like that who are not, right? And ultimately, experience trumps all. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to create a fund where it was by entrepreneurs for entrepreneurs. All my LPs are very successful entrepreneurs. I'm a former entrepreneur, so it was always like any companies I get in, it's only practical help. No useless advice. You need customers tomorrow? Great. I'll call this LP who does direct mail campaigns. We'll send one for you. We'll get you 1,000 customers by the end of the week. Done. Literally the stuff I wish I'd had as a CEO. That, I'm having this problem. I need this account. Can you get this done? All my LPs are like entrepreneurs, like in online media, PR, lead generation, all these things that they're all individuals who make a lot of money doing very specific practical things that any company could really use. So I set out to solve a problem. And I solved it by building this fund. And the fund is doing well because I'm solving this problem in my own way. So in that way, it kind of makes sense. But, these days it's like startups are like the sexiest thing in the world. And what people forget is a startup is nothing. Fundamentally trying to build a business. You're taking an idea and creating into some sort of a valuable platform or service that people can use. People get caught up in the sexiness of startups. There's nothing sexy about startups. It's just a lot of miserable work, and 92% of the time you fail. Really, there's nothing sexy about it. You sit in front of a computer, when your eyesight will be gone by the time you're a certain age. But if you want to solve a problem and start something that solves a problem, a small problem, going bigger, you will have more success than you know what to handle. So I just rambled for a second. I'm sorry.
No, keep going. All good. In our recent episode with Ramit Sethi, he talked about the difference between $30,000 questions and $3 questions. And one of those $30,000 questions was, am I automatically saving and investing? All of Us Financial, an online brokerage that's Wall Street for the rest of us, can help. You get more for your money, your trades are free, and you get money that no one else shares with you. Invest and trade with confidence. Their fully transparent business practices let you see exactly how much you can make and exactly how much they share with you. Try finding that anywhere else. Visit allofusfinancial.com. For a limited time, open a qualifying account and get up to $1,000 cash incentive. All of Us Financial. Start saving money on your trades today. Good. I'm curious what it is that you've seen as both psychological characteristics and personality traits in the most successful founders that you have had in your fund.
Or just in my experience, I would say it's two things. One is persistence, and two is they're really going after something that they care about. Because every company, anything you build will have issues. It'll go sideways, and if you care about it, you will keep on plowing through. If you're doing it because that's a sexy idea right now, and that's what people are funding, you will lose your way, and most likely than not, you will not succeed. Persistent and just a clear passion about the problem you're solving. Two very simple things. That's why it's really important to have, never start a startup unless there's a particular problem you want to solve.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, let's do this. Let's shift gears and let's actually start talking about the new book. I think that the thing that really struck me was that the book feels fictional, but at the same time autobiographical. So I'm curious kind of, what the impetus was for this book. And you talk about a journey at the very beginning of the book and what the impetus was for that journey.
Sure. So, the stuff I've written in my earlier books, right, which is very practical life lessons that I've learned and how one can apply them. There's a bunch I wanted to tell, but I wanted to tell them in a story, and here's why. Fundamentally, I think we learn best through storytelling. We teach best through storytelling, we learn best through storytelling, and I want to do it in such a way that all these lessons layered into a character, and as the character grows, in a manner that you can see, you can feel, but also layer them with all the other characters that comes in his life and all the things that happen. That fundamentally some of that is layered into you, some of that personal growth is layered into you by the time you read the book. You're also better just as the character is better. Mm-hmm. So a lot of these things about loving yourself, hitting bottom and rising, saying yes to life, core lesson on forgiveness, there's so much I've woven into there. And I could only do that through a really compelling story. To write that in a nonfiction book, I think would have not served the reader. Mm-hmm. So ultimately, it's about serving the reader. What serves the reader best? And for me, it was the story, and the part. And it's actually based on experience in my life. I walked the Camino de Santiago when I was in my mid-20s, which is an 11th century pilgrimage in Spain, and it's 550 miles long from one end of Spain to the other, from the Pyrenees French-Spanish border to basically the Atlantic Ocean, right? And so to take this as the background for this character, this guy walking the pilgrimage after the death of his father, and he's doing it in modern times. So, but it is a timeless journey. Like it could, someone could read this hundreds of years from now and still be applicable. And the growth that happens with the people he meets along the way, what they teach about life, and what he experiences and learns about life. That's why I used my personal experience, but then I took it and just fictionalize it to serve the story. Mm-hmm.
So where did the whole idea of Rebirth come from? What was why that as the title?
Rebirth actually was not the original title, but the title came from the book, because the Camino de Santiago is actually one character tells the main character is divided 3 parts: life, death, rebirth. Mm-hmm. And he's just going through and he's facing almost like his own metaphorical journey there. And later on, as I was after I sold the book to the publisher, we were trying to come up with a better title. I realized what is fundamental this book about. It's about rising. It's about becoming like you hit bottom and you rise by doing these particular things, and that's your personal rebirth. And it's a part of the Camino as well anyway, so it just fit perfectly.
Well, let's talk about the 3 sort of specific areas, one being love, the next being forgiveness, and the third being following your heart. So we kind of touched on love, but I want to get deeper into it, kind of, what this whole journey taught you about love and what you'd want to pass on to other people as a byproduct of your experience with this.
Well, as experience of writing the book or experience of walking the Camino?
Both.
2 very different things.
Both.
Well, I walked the Camino when I was in my mid-20s. I didn't have the kind of life experiences I have now. Right. Mm-hmm. So what I woven in is I took that basic experience, but I wove in the life experience I have now to put the wisdom in, if I can use that word. So love is ultimately I wove in about the key fundamental things about loving yourself, but then I wove it in a way that the character actually uses that to move forward. Mm-hmm. How he learns to move forward by using some basic things that actually I talk about in my first book. And so it's a practical application in a story. Mm-hmm. And, love ultimately is if you love yourself, what choices do you make? And also loving yourself, if you love another, what is that? What is true love? With the French guy, Louis, that he talks to, it tells him about how, whether she's with you or not, if that's not love. Love is like you love her regardless. That's love. Mm-hmm. And so, it's, then love for his father and other people he meets along the way. Fundamentally, love, it's about open heart, saying yes to life. Whatever happens, you say yes and you move forward with it. It's hard to describe what love is in a short encapsulation. That's why I write these books, man. I mean, like to weave in the whole thing, versus, hey, what's love? Well, it's a song. I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think the so much of that was really just eye-opening to me because, two things that really kind of struck me. These are two quotes. One, you said, with love, facts become irrelevant. And another was that it's our vulnerabilities that move us forward, not our strength, which to me was just really interesting. And, even looking at love through the lens of romantic love and realizing that, okay, yeah, not everything is meant to last forever, and making your peace with that as well. Like, I think that's where, for me, my greatest struggles had been. And so reading this was super helpful in that.
I'm glad. It's like, the main character is dealing with that. So I wanted to show that, and show like what he goes through, the pain, but then also the growth and then the letting go, and how, he's learning these, and they naturally apply to his life. Mm-hmm. So I'm glad you found that useful.
Well, let's talk about the idea of forgiveness, which I think is actually really kind of a perfect sort of segue from love, because often, the people that we love are the ones that hurt us and the ones that we need to forgive. And I'm just really curious, kind of, with your own life experience, what has been the impact of forgiveness, and what does forgiveness do in our lives, like neurologically, from a brain science perspective, and just overall life perspective? What is the value of forgiveness based on your experience?
Ultimately, forgiveness sets us free. That's it. That I can give you in a sense. Uh-huh. And that's what happens to this character, man, when he finally forgives. And he doesn't like set out to forgive. He doesn't even know he needs to do that, right? Sure. He goes through this journey, and in there, from what he learns, he naturally, something in him shifts, and he realizes that's what he's done. And that's actually when he's like, things start to work and move forward, and he makes the right decisions. And, forgiveness is the most beautifully selfish act we can do, because it sets us free. It's not about the other person ever anyway. They're gone from our lives or whatever. They're no longer in. Uh-huh. If they're in your life, then why are you with, ask yourself the question, why are they in your life? Uh-huh. Forgiveness is not for the other person. Even though it sounds like it, yeah. Forgiveness is for ourselves. It's selfish, it's beautifully selfish, and it's beautifully liberating. As long as you don't forgive, you're just holding yourself down. Uh-huh. And I'm holding myself down. I'll speak from my own experience, Yeah. But every time I've like learned to forgive and let go, you can't help but let go as you forgive. Uh-huh. And once you do that, like, it's like you're letting go of that rock you were hanging on to, so you start floating up. It's really simple.
Knowing that, at least, what I can say to that is, intellectually, that's really easy for me to understand, and I get the value of that. But I think there are moments in our lives when we know that intellectually, and yet we can't get ourselves to accept that emotionally.
Of course.
Of course. Is time the only reason that happens? I'm just very curious, like how
I think time is a reason, but time, you can collapse time, you can accelerate time. Mm-hmm. What you're taking time to do, if you make a conscious intention, you can actually do it much faster. Just how much you want to do it, how badly do you want to do it. Maybe, and it can happen in stages too. There's no such thing as like step one, do this, step two, do that.
Right.
But after forgiveness of others, always there's another important part, which is self-forgiveness, uh-huh. which I think is the most important part of forgiveness, because holding anything against ourselves does not serve us. We can just learn and let go and move forward. And I think it's a constant practice for human beings with human minds, dealing with other human beings, other human minds, and they're going to interact, and things are going to happen that one mind wants, the other mind doesn't, and there's a break of some sort, right? That's the nature of living as social creatures. So we have to let go to it's part of living. Mm-hmm. It's part of living the human drama. There's all of this, like, you don't look up on Wikipedia the word human, see per equals perfect. You don't see humanity equals perfect. It's a song, dance, drama, nightmare, joy, all just thrown into one. Uh-huh. It's part of the game of living, And to realize, I think it's sometimes important to realize this is just a part. This is a part of living. If I'm alive, this is a part of it. And be selfish and work on yourself to let it go, and life gets better. And so the practical part, some of it I've woven into the book, and some of it's just ultimately that's what commitment. If you commit and just work at it, it happens. Mm-hmm. But it has to take commitment, especially when you don't want to commit. You should commit.
So I think that makes a perfect setup to talk about this idea of following your heart and what that really means. Because I can tell you that if you had told me follow my heart when I was 19 years old, I would have asked you, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah. It's pretty cliche sounding, right? But it's something that, I mean, really. But like that's why, look, that's why I write these books. I don't just, I'm not a quote writer. I was actually talking to someone. I was like, I'm an author. I'm not a quote writer. Quote writers are platitudes. I want to write stuff that actually then shows the reality of it, shows the reality of forgiveness, shows the reality of following your heart, so it becomes practical, right? That's why we tell stories. Otherwise, just the best, New York Times bestseller list would have a quote list, okay, a quote card list. I mean, So following your heart is actually fundamentally, it's really simple. Yeah, and I was telling someone else about this today. It's our subconscious that drives us. Our neurocortex, our conscious mind, is such a small part of what actually drives us. It's just the one that makes up all the logical excuses for what the subconscious decided. I think a lot of following our heart is the subconscious speaking to us. And the way we do that is, meditation is great for that, or having a practice that gets you into flow is great for that, and you learn to listen to it. Doing a pilgrimage is great for that. But if any one of us who's lived life a little fundamentally knows what their heart is saying versus what their mind is saying. It's a matter of making a practice of listening to the heart. But here's the thing I've learned about listening to the heart. The heart does not guarantee anything. The mind loves to guarantee. You do this goal, go to school for 35 years, you'll become a VC, versus your heart is saying, go join the army. If you follow the heart, you only see the step next. But it leads to the magic. That's why it requires faith. I think that's why so many religions have the concept of faith, is that it requires going into the unknown. But that's where it all lies, not in the known, right? And it's listening to the deeper part of the self that we all have, that we all fundamentally know it's there, that I don't know why, but we wired to actually tune it out. So that takes practice too. For me, I found short meditations every day, once a day. But I've learned to listen to what comes up from within, literally from my physical gut. You just learn and you start doing it. You're like, oh yeah, this worked. So it's you make it a practice. It's not like some platitude, follow your heart, but and then start singing a song about it. That's useless, man. I know I struggle with that. I struggle with using these words sometimes because they are become so cliched. But I hope, with these books, what I do is that I actually show the practical application of it in a story that one can apply to themselves.
Yeah, I appreciate that perspective more than you can imagine, especially because of the practical application and how I typically feel about New Age nonsense.
Yeah, and it's like anyone can write all the best things out of theory. Anyone can write a business book out of theory. The one you want is the one I listen to is like Richard Branson or someone who's actually built stuff.
Yeah,
there's people out there who sell programs on how to make money without. That's the only way they've ever made money is by selling programs how to to make money. It's like the silliest thing in the world. It's like this Ponzi scheme upon Ponzi scheme. Just I only want to be around doers, and if it's in anything in my life, if I want to be fit, I want to be around people who are insanely fit. If I want to be rich, I want to be around people who are insanely rich. If I want to be someone who's loving, I want to be around people who are insanely loving. That's not people who talk about it. Not people who there's in fact I have this thing, if someone keeps on talking about how much they have integrity, that's basically a sure sign they have the opposite of that. Like people with integrity don't talk about it, they just do it, they live it, right?
So you brought up, being around people who are insanely rich. So I had to ask a couple of questions around this because I'm always curious, and our stories around money are something that I spend a lot of time thinking about. And I'm curious, kind of, what your own sort of perspective on wealth and the internal narrative around it has been as you've grown as a VC. And then the other question, which is semi-related to that, is having had a brother who has become so prominent, I am curious kind of what impact that has had on you and your own work, if any. So yeah.
Sure. Okay, so the first question again is, it's two questions.
It's the internal narrative around wealth. Like, what has yours been? How has it evolved? And what do you say to other people who perhaps are struggling with theirs?
Wealth, it's funny, man. Wealth is such a relative thing, right? Like, living in Silicon Valley, my perception of wealth has gotten really skewed. If your friends who were like eating, literally ramen,
Uh-huh.
living on ramen, and a year and a half later, they're driving brand new Ferraris and just burning out the clutch, and they don't care. It's just really silly. It's just like cartoonish, and sometimes you go through a phase where you kind of like you wish you had it. You see people you don't consider very smart having it, and you're like, what the hell? What did I doing wrong? And you realize after a while, man, so much of it's like serendipity and just putting yourself out there and luck and so much happening in the world that it's not a reflection of who you are, whether you make the money or not, right? And money just brings out more of you. If you were an ass before money, guess what? You're not going to be like some saint with money.
Yeah.
You'll just be a bigger ass. I mean, that's the funny thing. People are like, yeah, once I make some money, then I'll, spend more time with my wife and kids and love them more. Yeah, maybe not. By then, maybe your wife will divorce you and kids will hate you, because you're an ass during that time. Like, it's money. Look, we all want it. I think there's a line from a Danny DeVito movie where it's like, it's called money. That's why everyone wants it, because of the name, money. I have no idea what that means, but it's a great line, right? and I think wealth is relative, and the best wealth you can have is when you're actually really giving your all to something, you're creating something you really care about. So when the results come, they mean more, they're more fulfilling. Versus if you did something that was scammy and it, you can only, we all live and die within ourselves, and we all die alone fundamentally. You got to live with yourself. So I think true wealth is when you are able to create the success you want out of things that are really you giving your expression to the world. That's true wealth. Because how you feel about yourself and how you feel about things is so beautiful. Because you gave it your all, and this is what you cared about.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
No, please. It was interesting as you were saying that. I recently watched one of the Zeitgeist documentaries on Netflix. There's like 3 of them, but there's one really sort of interesting one. I think it was the very beginning. It was about the the narrator is talking about how his grandmother teaches him how to play Monopoly, and how the goal of Monopoly is to acquire. But he says the lesson that everybody seems to forget is what happens when the game is over. It all goes back in the box.
That's pretty good. And ultimately acquiring more and more and more is just you trying to fill an empty bottomless hole. The irony is if you work in the hole, the stuff just comes. Yeah. You got to do the work. I mean, you can't just sit there and, like piles of gold will drop on your head. Right. You got to, but if you work in the hole, you work in the inner self, and then you put yourself out to the world from that place. At least in my life, that's how I've seen success happen, consistently.
Yeah.
Now, as for your second question, yeah, I'm very proud of my brother. It's I've seen what he's I've known him all his life. He's my younger brother, and what he's done. It's really impressive. It's fundamentally changed an industry that's changing the entire world. I mean, I couldn't be prouder of him. So I love him. Anytime I run into anyone or whatever, I'm just immensely proud of him. That's it's what a gift to have him. And looking also, if you think about where we came from, right? We went off in our own separate directions, and some of them have combined, some of them are our own things. But it's amazing to knowing where we came from, what we went through, to see what he's done. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful.
Well, this has been really amazing and thought-provoking and eye-opening, as I expected it would be. I'd expect nothing less from you. So I have one last question for you, which is how we finish all of our interviews. What do you think it is that makes somebody or something unmistakable?
Ooh. When they're being their real self, you can tell. When someone's being their real self, I don't care who they are. I don't care if I agree with someone or not, but when they're just being their real self, I respect them and I like them. I think we sense that as human beings, man. We sense that, like the people that we don't forget, the people that leave a mark on us, they were just being their real self. And there's something beautiful about that, because there's so little of it in the world. I think especially now with all the social media and everything, where everyone's being a rock star on social media, right? It's like someone who, when you meet people who are just being real, and being honest about themselves and who they are to the world, it's special. That naturally makes them unmistakable.
Amazing. Where can people learn more about the book and all of the work that you do?
The book comes out January 3rd, so in a couple, it'll be out, now, I guess, whenever recording comes out. So it'll be on bookstores and Amazon, but you can go to rebirthfable.com and look it up, or just look up my name, Kamal Ravikant. I wish you best luck in spelling it online. But yeah, rebirthfable.com, or just find me online and and say hi. I'm around.
Awesome. Well, and for everybody listening, we will wrap the show with that.
Did you know that every Sunday our community manager, Milena, sends out 10 key takeaways from episodes just like this one? All you have to do to receive it is sign up for our newsletter. Just visit unmistakablecreative.com/newsletter and you'll get them delivered right to your inbox. Again, that's unmistakablecreative.com/newsletter.
If you enjoyed this episode or any of our other episodes, one of the biggest things you can do to support us is to leave us a review. Go to ratethispodcast.com/unmistakable and you'll see the ability to submit a review regardless of what app or device you're currently listening on. Again, that's ratethispodcast.com/unmistakable.
With Candy Crush Saga, the crush is real. Everyone has their own reason for crushing.
I play when it's manic around me. I'm just zen, trying to beat it.
It's so relaxing. It's my downtime.
It's like yoga for my mind with my morning tea.
Find out what makes the crush real with Candy Crush Saga. Download now from the App Store or Google Play for free.